All right, welcome to episode 189 of Trek Live. Bill and I are back to talk about Star Trek after what feels like too long. First off, how you doing this morning, Bill?
Doing well. Doing really well. Excited to be back and back to some normalcy. And on Halloween, for the first time, I think, on Trek Live, like actually doing a live stream on Halloween itself. So I think our topic today is all it could be, given what the day is. So excited to get into it.
Yeah, for those who celebrate Halloween, happy Halloween. That's today in the States. Bill, talk about. Well, I guess we should maybe do. How's your rewatch going?
Yeah, let's do the rewatch recap.
Yeah.
First of all, I love the fact that you're on the West Coast. I'm sure it's still dark.
It is still dark out, so I'm trying to take advantage of that and do spooky vibes. So I got
spooky
key light over here to kind of, at least you could see some of my face.
Your dog or your wife might come up behind you and sneak up on you.
Goose is on the bed, so he's got my 6 or my back.
All right, good. So yeah, my rewatch was paused because I was on vacation, which is why we weren't streaming last week. But I did make some progress yesterday. I've watched a good little chunk of season 5 of Voyager, season 7 of Deep Space Nine. Take me out to the Holosuite through once more onto the Breach for DS9 season 7, and drone through Timeless for Voyager season 5. So some really, really good ones in there. I love Drone. Timeless we've talked about before on Trek Live a couple of different times because it's near and dear to your heart. It's one of
my
your
favorite episode probably in all of Star Trek.
Right? Wow. Yeah. It's way up there for me too. I think it's a classic. I think it lives up to its reputation. There's some amazing technical stuff on display in that episode. The visual effects hold up incredibly well for an episode that's now 20 some years old, 23 years old, which is insane. Great score, great editing. Like there's some great transitional shots with bouncing back and forth through time, do 2 different timelines. Great Garrett Wang stuff. Harry Kim doesn't get a whole lot to do in the show. A couple episodes a season with a real spotlight on him, and some of those episodes are not necessarily seen as classics
the best,
in wide circles. But this one, he gets to flex and really carry, maybe Voyager's best single episode, get into the 2-parters and get into some conversations there. But I think it's certainly my favorite single episode of Voyager. It's a Harry Kim story, which is crazy. And he kills it. He gives a great performance to the heart of it. Drone, same kind of thing. I think that I mentioned on Twitter. It hits all 4 quadrants. It's got a big science fiction concept. It does cool Star Trek stuff with world building and that kind of stuff. It's got emotional resonance. Does character development really well. It's a classic as far as I'm concerned. It's a great episode of Star Trek. And on the Deep Space Nine front, I would highlight Treachery, Faith, and the Great River, which I think is like a really kind of underrated comedy. I think the story with Rom or with Nog. Having to help O'Brien out with trading for things and using his Ferengi instincts to get the job done. It really breeds some good comedy in this late stretch of Deep Space Nine. There's not a ton of that. Comedic relief. It always feels like a really good pressure valve when it happens, and some really good Weyoun stuff too. Great Jeffrey Combs episode with Weyoun 5 defecting, Weyoun 6 defecting. I think it's Weyoun 6. Trying to defect, and having some really good scenes with Odo on the runabout. So, and then once more into the Breach, I think is actually really good too, with giving Core a send off and kind of wrapping up that arc. That's kind of a loose recurring theme in Deep Space Nine. Blood Oath, sort of K-less, and then once more into the Breach, kind of dealing with this old warrior who is looking to go out in a blaze of glory and gets to do it. good Martok stuff in that. So it was a good weekend of Star Trek for me.
Yeah.
Coming off of vacation.
Long story short,
really great
yeah. Really good
it
episodes.
felt good.
Yeah.
What about you?
For me, I've actually been trucking along. I was trying to remember what was the last episode I mentioned on here.
I think Strange Bedfellows was the last one you mentioned.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. So that was 19. So I'm now up to the Dogs of War.
Okay, right at the end.
So the changing face of evil, When It Rains,
Tacking into the wind.
Extreme Measures, I think, is that?
Yep.
Yeah, the next one. And then I have What You Leave Behind. So I only have 2 episodes really left of Deep Space Nine.
Wow.
Yeah, it's man, once it gets going, it's really good. There's some stuff in it that I'm just not really interested in, and sometimes find myself wishing I was somewhere else. But I'll definitely talk about that in the seed or skip it, and then also just a tease. This is the end of my actual official rewatch, so yeah, we'll be announcing some stuff with that as well. But yeah, this that's not to knock this season at all. I know feels like I've been going pretty slow at it, but yeah, it really does pick up pretty quickly. So and there's not, and it's serialized, but there's also it does a great job of making the episode feel like the one where type of episodic that Star Trek is known, but also have this recurring theme going throughout the show. So yeah, really good track. This is probably one of the strongest seasons, I would say, and maybe that's because of the serialization of it. But yeah, loving it so far. But definitely looking forward to a break. So
yeah, you've been doing this for a long time, and I think you started your this rewatch when you were still in college, and before we officially started Trek Live, we were kind of in planning stages when you may have kicked that off. But talking years, this was a years-long venture for you, so we'll definitely be touching on that. Yeah, in future episodes, talking about your experience with it, and looking forward to hearing your perspective on completing like such a long running rewatch.
Yes.
Cool. We have Jimmy and Cyber Honey in
welcome,
the chat.
Guys. Good to see you.
Welcome to both. I think we should get into the topic at hand. We're going to be talking about Halloween, kind of appropriate episodes of Star Trek, episodes that give us those Halloween vibes and feels. If we were going to do a Halloween marathon of episodes of Star Trek, what kind of episodes would we go to?
We'll give you some ideas.
We're gonna touch on the ones that do it for us. I'm curious if anybody else is in the chat. Jimmy77 and Cyber Honey, of course, who are here. Anybody else lurking? If you have episodes that we're not mentioning that are near and dear to your heart, we're definitely eager to hear you cite them, and we'll mention them as we go along and share our thoughts as well. So, but I'm certainly no horror expert. There are a lot of folks out there who really get into this and live and breathe the genre, so to speak. But it's a pretty, from my understanding at least, it's pretty wide spectrum. There's a lot of kinds of horror, right? Like there's ghost stories, there's creature features, there's body horror and psychological horror, and I think Star Trek kind of covers the gambit on the horror side of things. There's also the dress up, and
that's what I was gonna say. There's two types of kind of Halloween vibes episodes here, where it's like it's definitely playing on the horror themes of the times of the when the short show is airing, but also there's a million different holodeck episodes that you could mention that's just about dressing up and stuff
being
like
somebody
that.
else, going incognito. If you boil it down to that, I feel like there's two lanes here. There's the horror, and then there's the dress up. Try to go in disguise, go in costume lane, which is a whole different one. different population of episodes that are both, I think, equally appropriate. Folks who went to Halloween parties last night were doing what the characters do in all kinds of episodes of Star Trek. Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk about both of them. And I guess my first question to you would be like, do we want to go series by series?
I think so. At least for me, I'll kick this off.
Usually the way we do it,
series by series. The episodes that came to mind first for me were TOS episodes, and so I think we should just kick it off with TOS.
Yeah. Let's do it.
For me, it's obviously people mention Cat's Paw and Spock's Brain as those types of horror movies, but there's some really good horror episodes. The Man Trap, I think is a good one for sure. I think there's some kind of Bill mentioned it, creature feature, but that's kind of the first couple that came to mind for me, as far as TOS goes and just of this topic goes. But I mean, there's a bunch of TOS episodes that you could mention here.
Yeah, I think Cat's Paw is the easy one, like you said. Spock's Brain too. Spock's Brain is like a classic B movie. Yeah. Kind of cheesy horror story. Cat's Paw plays on obvious Halloween tropes and is probably the most obvious example of actually really actively embracing not just horror but Halloween specifically. But one of the first ones that popped into my mind was The Man Trap, and it's probably because it's the first episode that ever aired of Star Trek. So I think when you think about the way that sort of set a tone for this is a territory that Star Trek's going to be comfortable playing in. I have a piece of paper in front of me with like a few dozen episode titles written down, and I think a lot of that is probably due to the fact that it was kind of built into the groundwork, and it's part of the foundation of Star Trek. The first episode to ever hit the airwaves was sort of a horror story, a creature feature, a monster of the week kind of story. So the Man Trap's an obvious one, I think, as well. If we're thinking about the dress up lane, I think Piece of the Action. There's some good costume going incognito and our good friend Dom from Trek Central. I think that might be his all-time favorite episode of Star Trek. But you think about how many episodes of TOS involve the crew having to go in costume to sort of blend into the crowd. Episodes like Return to the Archons, like I said, a Piece of the Action. Patterns of Force, where they dress up as Nazis, which is an interesting choice, of course.
Take or leave, maybe that episode.
Yeah, but there's tons of that. I mean, that's a recurring theme.
I'm trying to remember the episode with Kodos the Executioner. Because there's a performance in that. They're kind of dressing up. But it's also like, is there axe murder on the ship? So that's a good one.
Cyber Honey mentions Galileo 7 and The Enemy Within. I think they are both good examples too. With Galileo 7, there's some big creatures there.
Yeah, they're fighting on.
Absolutely. The Enemy Within, the sort of imposter,
Freaky Friday
wild card.
Yeah.
And Jimmy 77, I think, hit the nail on the head with The Devil in the Dark.
Oh, dang it! Yeah, that's
an obvious one that it doesn't come to mind. I think for whatever reason, I think it's because the Hoarder ends up not being a threat, an adversary in the end. Like it's not a true. It's the way it subverts the idea of the monster movie kind of format. But that episode is set up and tees you up with those horror tropes and makes you think that you're going down a certain road and twists you down a side road to a different outcome. So that's a great call. And definitely a good Halloween episode, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What about TNG?
There's a ton.
There's a ton. There's both some great horror stuff in it, but there's also some great like holodeck dress up stuff, and just there's some that are both. It's just
What's the first one that comes to mind for you? TNG.
TNG, probably Conspiracy, maybe, because
Ooh, okay.
it's like in the first season, and it's kind of like the first time that I'm like genuinely kind of like it's I don't know, it's horror, but it's also like it's got some like it's very intense and like thrilling and just because like the Picard meets with the other captains, that's like really intense, like who can you trust, really go back for, and then obviously like the eating of the bugs, and then the attachment on the back of their necks, like that's just horror to me. And so that's maybe why I thought of Conspiracy first is because it's like in the first season. So but yeah, that was probably the first one for me that came to mind for TOS. Got a few more options obviously, but what about for you? Or not TOS, TNG.
TNG. Honestly, the first one that came to mind for me is Sub Rosa, because it's like such a it's a ghost story. Like, and it makes no bones about it. There are tons of them. Cyber Honey sent us a big long list on Twitter with like I think 8, and I wrote down many of the same that I'm sure we'll touch on here in a second. But Sub Rosa came to mind first for me, right up at the top for across all Star Trek, because it is so unapologetically a ghost story. I mean, it's maligned, and I'm not a fan of it on its own merits, but it's, again, if you're looking for episodes that completely embrace everything there is about like the horror, it just makes no bones about, no apologies about being a horror hour of Star Trek. Sub Rosa is that. So that's the first one for me. But episodes like some of the ones that Jimmy 77 just named, Genesis, Night Terror, Schisms, Phantasms, Identity Crisis comes to mind for me. That's another one that's early for me because it scared me as a kid. It definitely was one of my earliest memories of Star Trek was walking into the room and seeing those creatures that are glowing and kind of like lurking in shadows, and that it freaked me out. So that made an impression on me, and kind of keeps it front of mind. Some other ones that are not as obvious maybe are Q Who, the introduction to the Borg. I think they're genuinely scary there.
They're actually scary.
Some haunted house stuff on the ship, on the Borg cube, and Skin of Evil is another one that freaked me out as a young kid. Armis is a kind of a creature, and there's some horror vibes going on there too. As for you, what else came to mind for you for TNG, or ones that like stood out to you, like are genuine kind of favorites, or what would you watch if you were looking for TNG?
Terrible titles. Genesis was on my list as well. Schisms obviously was on my list, but the one where Geordi is they're all getting pulled back to that planet, and
Identity Crisis.
That was the one. Okay.
Yeah.
That was definitely up on my list. When I think of horror and scary, like it's a cool like I don't know, that's kind of a production element piece where he gets to like dress up, and like it's I think that's really good. But yeah, there's also some great obviously some great holodeck ones. For better or for worse in TNG, but those are mine for TNG, I'd say. But I mean, we could talk about another thing. I guess we could talk about TNG is the movies. Some of the movies are really good. First Contact kind of is. There's a I don't know. I think it's in First Contact. There's a scene with the Borg where he gets a crewman gets assimilated. That always freaked me out so much. So yeah. I think it's in. It's in First Contact.
Oh yeah. That was a big deal when it came out, because I think it was the first time we ever actually saw like that assimilation process happen. Like, how does it happen? Up until that point, it's kind of nebulous, like what exactly happens. And seeing the tubules go into the guy's neck and watching him change was definitely scary. back then. It still is. So yeah, First Contact, Cyber Honey, or who was it? Yeah, Cyber Honey mentioned deserves an honorable mention. And I think there's a lot of horror stuff in that. I think of the engineering crewman who crawls up into Jeffrey's tube.
Yeah.
Gets snatched, and then the female engineer who follows him and gets snatched too is pretty scary.
Yeah.
For Queen, there's a lot of horror stuff coming out of that with the detached body coming together and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Some creepy stuff for sure, all through that movie.
Yeah.
As far as the dress up thing, like you said, there's tons. Every time they go into the holodeck, right? There's the big goodbye.
It's almost too many to mention. Yeah.
Elementary due date. There's tons of them. So no shortage of options in TNG. And I think a lot of that is the shows that Brandon Braga was a part of. One of his kind of calling cards is he's a huge horror fan and wanted to bring those sensibilities more to the forefront. And he's a very active presence on TNG, and then obviously on Voyager and Enterprise as well. And all of those shows, I think, because of the horror influence on him and his heavy influence on those shows, there's a ton of them.
Mm-hmm.
Deep Space Nine. What comes to mind for you for Deep Space
Nine? There's a few that come to mind. I think Impact Nor kind of feels like they're going into kind of like a haunted house type of place, but then there's also like a kind of like a creature feature, but it's I don't know.
It's kind of like a slasher movie too.
Yeah. Let's see here. My list.
Deep Space Nine. While you're kind of looking, I'll just say this is the one I had the toughest time with.
Yeah,
I think
having a tough
there
time.
aren't as many, and like I said, I think Brandon Braga's non-presence on Deep Space Nine it shows. I think he's got a lot of writing credits on the episodes that we're I think going to here, and or we're about to with Voyager and Enterprise and some of the TNG ones we just named. And I think there was less of an instinct to go this route with Deep Space Nine.
Kind of. Would Equilibrium maybe? It's with Duran is kind of like.
Yeah. There's some psychological.
Kind of type of thriller, maybe. I don't know. That's the only.
There's some creepy imagery in that.
The other one that I think. Yeah.
There's imagery in that with him wearing the mask. Mm-hmm. That definitely made an impact on me as a young kid.
But I mean,
psychological horror is a subgenre that's certainly one of them.
There's also some great dress up stuff in it too. Like there's some really great holodeck stuff in Deep Space Nine that we could talk about.
There is.
Man, that's one side of it where you could point to that maybe as some.
You
of those
could go there,
unless because it's hard to find like a true like horror one. I know it did. Deep Space Nine tackles some like really deep stuff, but but nothing like true that I could point to like a true horror type of.
I think Empok Nor would be the only one that I would make a case totally embraces the horror.
Yeah.
Elements. But I think Distant Voices is one that just got mentioned. That's a Dr. Bashir kind of goes within his own mind, and there's that alien that's kind of chasing him.
Oh yeah. Okay.
There's some hard stuff in that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yep. I think even the darkness and the light, if you look at it through the lens of almost like a slasher movie with people getting picked off all around you, all your friends are going, and you're kind of waiting for it to hit you. There's some elements of horror there, and then even when she gets to see him, he's kind of like hanging in the shadows. He's
yeah. With all of, like people from the Resistance. Yeah. The hero one. Okay.
They're all. Yeah, I think there are some elements. I wouldn't. It's not as, I think, obvious with we're doing horror this week kind of pronouncements the way some of the other shows would do. Even The Passenger from early season 1, that's another one, like serial killer kind of a story. They do some things with who is it? There's stuff in Deep Space Nine that'll tread on that territory, but it's not as embracing of it, I think. But like you said, there is some dress up kind of opportunities. They really play on the
anytime they go to Vix.
recreational.
Yeah.
Bada bing, which is one you really enjoyed.
Jeez, dang, actually, yeah, that was really good. Yeah, that was definitely a dress up one.
Army and Bashir.
Army and Bashir. Yeah, there's a good amount of in Deep Space Nine as far as dress up goes.
Absolutely.
Voyager, where do we start?
There's tons of them.
There's so
many.
I think the first one that came to mind for Voyager, at least my notes, is The Haunting of Deck 12. It's just like a typical like campfire scary story. Yeah, there's some dark, key light just on half the face stuff that's really good. So yeah, that's probably the first one that came to mind for Voyager. But I mean, we could do season by season. I feel like almost.
We could.
Yeah.
I wrote down a good handful from season 2. Actually, some of them are kind of similar. I think I kind of lump like Cold Fire and Persistence of Vision. They're both kind of do some similar things with Kess being at the center of sort of the climax of the episode and having some scary things happening around her with that. I think maybe another one, maybe a theme here is some episodes that don't have good reputations tend to be in this ballpark, but what embraces the body horror kind of subgenre more than Threshold does, right?
Oh yeah.
That is like the ultimate body horror episode of Star Trek. But, some of the stuff.
Some gross out moments as well.
Yeah. The one I kind of circled as maybe the most prominent for me. Haunting of Deck 12 obviously is a big one, but The Thaw is another one.
Yeah.
That really.
It deals with fear too. It's like it's really, I think it's dealing with fear, and that's a good pick.
If you go into it and you're afraid, if you're one of those people who's afraid of clowns, which thankfully I am not, but there are people out there who are, that would be one that would really get under your skin. And it's not even just him, like Michael McKean as fear.
Yeah,
it's the whole circus sort of production
creepy
design,
vibes,
and all the vibes that come out of that situation they find themselves in. If you're of a certain mentality, that's an episode that could really affect you. And like you said, it's all about fear itself and how it affects us and what its merits and what the hurdles it generates are. Like it really gets into all of that. So that's a really prominent one for me. Macrocosm's another one with a lot of
creature feature,
creature feature kind of stuff going on there. Yeah, some alien vibes. Jimmy 77 just kind of echoed that in the chat. The Star Trek version of Alien, I would agree with that. And then Darkling is another one that I wrote down, which is another episode I'm not huge on at all, but it's got a sort of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of a thing with the Doctor. That can get pretty creepy.
Man, where to start? Bride of Chaotica. Coda. I feel like there's some interesting stuff with like dealing with death and things like that. That's kind of what came to mind as well. So this, and then there's countless dress up episodes. Man, that's where to start there. But yeah, for me, the first dress up one was probably Bride of Chaotica. But there's a million of those.
There is, kind of going right back to the beginning. I think the first or second, I think the pool hall may have been first, but right alongside of it, Janeway's first one of the first recurring holiday programs that we see is Janeway's sort of gothic horror kind of gothic horror novel that she's playing out on the holodeck. The first season, which I don't care for much, but even as early as that, they're kind of toying with that as a sort of early piece of the puzzle for Voyager. So it might be Voyager and TNG are kind of both maybe on equal playing fields as far as like how many of them there are. I may have a tough time picking. We'd have to like actually do a tally of the two series, like episode guides, like side by side, tally which one has more episodes that are like, yep, har. I think it'd be close.
It'd be definitely close. That's for sure. Yep.
Yeah. Cyber Honey mentions Persistence of Vision. I definitely mentioned that. I would agree. I think that one is an obvious horror episode for sure.
Scientific Method. I'll also mention.
How did I forget that?
You got to. That's another big one for me. I know that Voyager has a lot of these, but another big one is Scientific Method. Creeps me out every time. I watch it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a great one. I didn't think of that, and that's an obvious one. That image of the aliens plugging stuff into Janeway's head to create her headache is a tough one to forget. And it's scary. It's messed up.
Yeah.
I think that somebody in the chat, Cyber Honey, mentioned Repression as a season 7 episode.
Yeah,
that's another one.
Good one.
Late in the game.
Yeah,
that's got some good. It's another one with like crewmen being picked off and not knowing where it's coming from, who's responsible.
Yeah.
That's another kind of subgenre of Trek. Kind of, and the Darkness and the Light does some of that stuff as well, which we just mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of stuff with the Borg too, in Voyager. Scorpion, 8472 in that episode is really scary.
Yeah.
When it pops out of the wall and hits Harry, and see what it's doing to Harry. There's some real horror vibes going on there. I think Dark Frontier, I've mentioned before. There's a scene in that where Seven's walking through an assimilation chamber when she's on board Cube with the Queen, and she's kind of watching a civilization go. That's always kind of stuck with me as a really terrifying scene to bear witness to. So that anytime they kind of tackle the Borg, they lean into some of those themes as well.
Yeah. Yep.
About Enterprise, what comes to mind for Enterprise?
Well, if you want to mention a few episodes we just covered, at least for me, Impulse is one of those ones that we just did at Undervalued Trek.
Definitely,
it's one of the. I think it's a true horror type of episode. It's the Vulcan kind of zombie episode. People likes this, cited as that. But it's not just the zombie episode. I think there's some. We talked about it a couple weeks ago, so I'll point to that. But it's not just the zombie episode. There's some good stuff in it. Man, there's a bunch. I think Dead Stop is kind of into like a House of Horrors type of thing, kind of. There's a few for sure, but those are the first ones that came to mind for me.
Jimmy 77 just hit one on the head, I think, with Regeneration, the Borg episode that opens with sort of an homage to the Thing in the polar, the Arctic setting with the scientists who uncovered the Borg. That's definitely got some strong horror vibes going. Really trying to take the Borg back to their
roots.
The real horror roots, with kind of trying to echo Q-Who a little bit with the unknowable aspect of them, which kind of wore off, I think, into TNG and certainly into Voyager. Jimmy 77 mentions Carpenter Street. I think there's some definite stuff going on there with going back to more contemporary time and people getting abducted, and I think just seeing Xindi reptilians, kind of lurking in shadows, and 2003 Detroit lends itself to some horror images and visuals and all that stuff for sure. Strange New World, Cyber Honey mentions. I was thinking of that myself. I didn't write it down, but something got mentioned. I think when we talked about hunting on Deck 12, the sort of sitting around the campfire, telling horror stories. There's a moment in that where they do that on the surface of the planet before the proverbial S hits the fan.
Yeah.
That really plays on those horror flavors. And even some of the stuff in the cave, kind of not knowing what's around the corner on that planet. Are there actually rock creatures or not?
Yeah.
There's definitely
That's an early yeah.
Very early. Yeah.
Another
Mock Soul.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What were you gonna say? What were you gonna say?
No, go ahead. I got a few episodes that I've just thought of, but go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Real quick, just Mock Soul. I think that another kind of creature feature kind of thing.
Oh yeah,
with this ginormous web of disgustingness, grabbing crewmen and not knowing what to do, and there's a real challenge in that one to getting out of it, and it's certainly it's a creature feature at its core, I think. So, what were you gonna say? What are some of the other ones that you have?
The other horror one that I'll mention is Fight or Flight, I think.
Yeah,
that's the one. That's the early one where like there's things upside down, like sucking blood and stuff. Yeah. It's really scary. It's one of those times in Enterprise where like space feels dangerous again. I think to this point, at least for me, we kind of get comfortable kind of out in space, and it's like one of those first early episodes I think that they're like, oh geez, this could be scary. And also North Star is kind of transitioning into those like dress up type of episodes where it's not really a horror per se, but it's like just kind of fun dress up episode.
Fight or Flight's a great call. I didn't write that one down, but you're so right that it's one of the mission statements of Enterprise from the beginning was to make space scary again, because that is sort of a unavoidable reality of the 24th century shows, is that it's not quite that. Like they try to do a little bit of it in Voyager with being in the Delta Quadrant and having some unknown, but like the nature of the Next Generation, like it doesn't really lend itself to that feeling as often. And Enterprise really wanted to do that early on, and Fight or Flight I think might be its most successful outing from that perspective. Being outmatched and really out in the frontier and alone and having no clue what you're gonna find. And yeah, I think it's a great episode for that, from that perspective. What about new stuff? Anything from the new shows that kind of stands out to you?
Maybe the it's an early episode in Discovery. Maybe it's Context, or one of the early episodes when they go over to the I forget the ship's name. The Glen. Everyone's body's turned inside out. That to me is really scary. And then there's also some other like scary Klingon stuff as well. So I think early Discovery for me. But there's also some like when in Picard when he goes back, like he's on the Borg cube. There's some like really scary stuff there that I think they do a good job of showing like the post-traumatic type of influence that the Borg have on Picard. So I really like that as well. Like that's probably it for me as far as the new stuff.
I wrote down a couple. Context is for Kings for sure. Going over to the Glen, that's a great haunted house kind of situation. Die Trying from this past season of Discovery when they're on the Barzan, the TCOV.
Dang it, that's a good one. Yeah.
There's a lot of haunted house stuff going on there. Where there's the where are they? And he's kind of cloaked and can't communicate. And there's some creepy stuff going on there. From Picard, if you're talking like costumes and going incognito, Stardust City Rag when they're dressed up to go down. That's a good one too. There's some really outlandish, over the top costumes.
Yeah.
going on there.
Yeah.
And then from Lower Decks, I think Much Ado About Boimler is the episode from the first season with the medical anomalies when Boimler's like transported and he's in limbo, and they put him on this ship to go off to some colony where all the medical unanswerables are going, and it's the ship full of really wacky, crazy stuff that's got some classic Star Trek horror touches there. So yeah, there's a few. The nature of these shows being a little bit more serialized or a lot more serialized sometimes doesn't lend itself to the embracing of a genre for an episode as often. But there are flavors for sure, I think, in each show that if you're looking for, I think you hit the nail on the head with the Impossible Box with Picard going back to the Borg cube. That feels scary and
scary elements and scenes for sure.
Yeah, there's flavors of it here and there.
Yeah, but I think we did mention a lot of episodes. I think we've definitely established that the horror genre has its fingerprints on pretty much every show. I think it's just a pillar of Star Trek and the sci-fi genre. And there's also some fun cutesy dress up episodes that we mentioned as well. So you guys got a best of both worlds. For me, I think the best practice for when doing this, and maybe I'll do a little bit of this week, I like to pair a kind of a freakier, more horror type of episode with kind of a dress up one, so you don't get too that's just my practice when I'm watching like a horror film in general. Like I have to watch something funny afterwards just because it kind of alleviates tension. So I think that's definitely a good watch strategy, I will say.
I'm gonna put you on the spot then and say, if you had to do it tonight, what would you do if you were gonna pick a scary and a fun dress up to kind of give you both flavors of Halloween tonight for you? Your taste, your favorites. What would you do?
That's a tough one. It's
putting you on the spot.
Are we doing like specifically just the series? Like I have to do one TOS or one? Okay. Yeah, then I'm probably doing like Conspiracy or Haunting of Deck 12 or something like those types of episodes, and then I'm pairing it with probably a TOS episode, so a piece of the action maybe, or what's Picard's first episode where he goes to he's
Big Goodbye.
The Big Goodbye. Yeah, that's probably one that's where I like piece of the action, but it's probably Big Goodbye, and Haunting of Deck 12 or Impact Nor or Schisms or something like that, something creepy and
right.
Yeah, what about you? If you were to use that watch strategy, would you or would you even do that type of
I would if we were in the right situation. I would definitely embrace this. If we were doing a Trek After Dark tonight, this is the kind of thing we'd be doing. So I can definitely see myself in this situation and having to pick stuff. I think I'd probably pick Impulse because I think that's so obviously horror, and it's an episode I really like. Impact Nor would be the other one. I think maybe one of those two for that, and then for the dress up, I think Big Goodbye is a good one. Elementary Do Your Data, something like that.
That's good.
Bada Bang, Bada Bang.
Yeah.
One of them, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe, but it depends. If I picked Impact Nor, maybe to balance it out, I'd do
to keep
Impulse and then Bada Bang, Bada Bing. Doing Enterprise and Deep Space Nine.
Nice. Good picks.
A couple real quick last things that are getting thrown in the chat. Jimmy77 mentions a scene that always scared him was the transporter accident in the motion picture in the ear. The SETI Alpha eel in Star Trek 2.
Yeah.
Great calls from the movies. We did an episode, I feel like maybe a couple years ago on Halloween week. We did one on scary moments, like more specific, like specific scenes. And I think we definitely spoke about both of them, and I would echo that. So this is kind of a sister episode to that, for the Halloween flavor. And then Cyber Honey mentions Wolf in the Fold. There's definitely, I can't believe we didn't mention that. It's not an episode that I particularly love, but that does the Jack the Ripper thing, serial killer, obvious horror stuff going on there. So great call. Yeah. Totally true.
Yeah, I think that about does it. A lot of people do a top 5 of these types. We're just the top, as many as we can think of.
Throwing episodes out.
Yeah, just so we can give you guys options. You guys know the drill. The discussion doesn't have to stop here. We'll be back next week to talk about more Trek. But Twitter and Discord are probably the best places to go. And maybe we'll post some of our favorites there. In Discord, I want to thank everybody for watching. It's good to be back. It's good to be back talking about Trek. I'm excited for next week to talk about more Star Trek. So thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you guys next week.
Take care, everybody.